All right, so how's everyone doing? You all hanging in there? You're good? You're gonna make it through the term in one piece? Okay.
Probably.
What's it, probably?
Maybe.
Emma, who said
50-50.
probably? Kate, did you? Okay, well, come on, what's going on?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers, okay, that's, well, yeah, fingers crossed.
I was
Look, we're
gonna
all
say barely.
barely. Yeah. Well, you know what? You're all smart. You'll all do just fine. It all seems a little overwhelming when you're in the middle of it, but you know what? You just get through it, right? You just do one assignment at a time, one class at a time, and before you know it, it's the holidays, and you're done, right? So, only way to look at it. But I feel your pain because we're all in the same boat, right? So it's just trying to juggle as many things as possible. So for this class, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. If anyone was on the syllabus probably about an hour ago, it looks totally different now because there's things happening. There's things happening. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to question period is happening right now. So we're going to dip in for a few minutes. We'll check it out. We'll hear what people have to say, and then we'll talk about it. From there, we will talk a little bit about the latest COVID news, because I think that dovetails with your final assignment, and some of you may be talking about COVID and the politics of COVID. And then with the final assignment in mind, we will discuss public records. Maybe some of the kinds of public records that can be used for the final assignment. And then we'll break, and then for the rest of the class, I can either keep talking about the assignment, or I can set up like one-on-one sessions with folks if they want for the rest of the class. And if we run out of time for that, then I'm available for the rest of the week. So that's I've already spoken to a couple of you about your assignments. So that's no problem. We can arrange that. But rest assured that if you have any questions or any doubts at all, they will be answered. Right? You will go into the assignment with as much clarity as possible. I can guarantee you that. All right. All right. So why don't we start by dipping into question period here. So let's just see what's going on.
And across the country to protect French. We are here to protect francophones across the country. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Prime Minister. Our rights stop where injury to others occur. Those are the words of the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Now, based on what the Minister of Canadian Heritage said, he's responsible for the CRTC, Radio-Canada, and culture, that I would lose my right, that anyone would lose their rights, that we all lose our freedom of expression as soon as someone decides to state that they are injured or offended by what is being said. Can the Prime Minister confirm that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. No, Mr. Speaker, we will always defend the freedom of expression and our creators and artists, their right to challenge our authorities, to challenge each other. We need our creators to make us laugh, to make us think about a better world, a different world. Our creators are the essence of our identity. We will always support them and defend their freedom of expression. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Look, talking about creators, who's in charge of censorship at Radio-Canada? because of a comment, not a complaint, not a letter to the Ombudsman, a simple comment, an episode of La Petite Vie was censored by Radio-Canada, and it was replaced by a warning in the event that someone would have, might have confused La Petite Vie with a BBC documentary. Can the Prime Minister tell us if Guylaine Tremblay, Marc Labrèche, or Claude Meunier criticizing a Black, playing a Black needs to be censored at Radio-Canada? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will always defend the right, the freedom of expression, the ability to fully express oneself in this country. Decisions made by Radio-Canada are independent of of the government. We expect everyone to defend fundamental rights. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the Bloc voted against our motion to tax the ultra-rich and excessive profits being made by large corporations. Families are having trouble making ends meet, and the ultra-rich people have recorded record profits. Why does the Prime Minister always defend the ultra-rich? Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, when we were elected in 2015, the first thing we did was to increase taxes on the rich and reduce them for the middle class. Unfortunately, the NDP voted against that initiative. Each step along the way, we were there to help the middle class, to help lift Canadians out of poverty. And during the pandemic, we are here to help Canadians, workers, and small business. We are going to ensure that we are always there to help Canadians to make it through this crisis, to create a better world, because they are prosperous. We will be there for Canadians each step along the way.
Well, let's talk about what happened yesterday. Yesterday, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the Bloc voted against our motion to tax the ultra-wealthy and to tax the excess profits of large corporations. Let's talk about what excess profits look like. Westons, who own large grocery stores across Canada, have received massive profits during this pandemic, and what they're doing is increasing dividend payouts to their shareholders while they are cutting the pay of frontline workers. So why does this Prime Minister stand with the Westons instead of frontline workers?
The Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, the very first thing this government did in 2015 when we got elected was we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. And what did the NDP do, Mr. Speaker? They voted against it. Every step of the way, we have been there to support the middle class, to support people working hard to join it, and to make sure Canadians got ahead. Whether it was 1 million jobs created over the past 5 years, whether it was 1 million people lifted out of poverty, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, we will continue to fight for Canadians and for their success.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement...
Mr. Speaker, the government has finally acknowledged that its policy isn't working, and that's why it's going to be introducing a new policy framework for China. China has put in place subversive operations here in Canada. It's targeting Canadians and jeopardizing the rights and freedoms of Canadians. When will the government put forth a real plan to stop China's operations here in Canada? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. I thank my honourable colleague for his question. Mr. Speaker, on the motion put forth by the Conservative Party today, we were prepared to move amendments, constructive amendments, to advance the situation. In terms of foreign policy and national security, what we want is to work with opposition members with respect to the new framework we're putting forth. This is a normal development since 2020. China of 2020 is not the same as it was many years ago. We are developing plans to respond to this new reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Député de Wellington.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the government will be voting in favour of our motion tomorrow.
The government said it would
make a decision on Huawei before the election. Then in July, it said it would make a decision on Huawei after the election. It's now been more than a year since the election and still no decision. The government also says that it believes in multilateralism, but 4 of the 5 eyes have already made a decision to restrict Huawei from their networks. Canada is unilaterally alone in not making a decision. When will the government join with their allies and make a decision on Huawei's participation in Canada's 5G network?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government is going to continue to ensure that Canadian networks are kept safe and secure, and we've been consistent on this point for many months now. While we won't comment on any specific companies, an examination of 5G technologies and a review of security and economic considerations is ongoing. We're going to weigh these matters with allies and partners, with our security experts, and we're going to make the best decision for Canadians, not on the basis of politics.
Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, the Public Safety Minister says he doesn't, quote, tolerate hostile foreign actors threatening Canadians, but China's Operation Fox Hunt continues without real action to charge and arrest state-sponsored bullies terrorizing Canadians. This morning, the Foreign Minister said the Public Safety Minister will bring forward measures to protect the safety and security of Canadians. So to the Minister, and for all those being harassed and bullied by China's communist regime, what exactly are those actions and when will they be implemented?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me also be very clear that we know that the activities of hostile state actors are prevalent in this country. They use their intelligence and security services to threaten and intimidate individuals outside their country, and when individuals in Canada are subjected to harassment, manipulation, or intimidation by foreign states, these activities constitute a threat to Canada's sovereignty and to the safety of all Canadians. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure them that our security agencies and law enforcement agencies are actively taking steps to protect them, their personal information, and their interests, both domestic and foreign, from the threat of foreign interference and espionage.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Well, he recognizes this reality, but on China, these liberals are clearly falling behind our allies, and they are failing to protect the safety and security of Canadians. In 1 year, Operation Fox Hunt coerced 680 people around the world with stark options: return to China or commit suicide. And families in China are threatened or arrested to force compliance. Canada's National Security Committee report said that part of this operation is even carried out here at home in our CMP offices. The US has already made arrests. So how far does this go? How many Canadians will be harmed before this government, this minister, actually does something?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would reiterate that we are taking a whole government approach, protecting the interests of Canadians and security of Canadians. Our security and intelligence community, including CSIS and the RCMP, are actively investigating threats of foreign interference and espionage, and where the evidence exists, we'll take action. But in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we've undertaken a significant outreach campaign to sensitize Canadians, Canadian companies, and other stakeholders involved in this activity or subject to this activity. Mr. Speaker, we will take the steps necessary to keep Canadian interests safe.
The Honourable Député.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Communist Party of China is working tirelessly to expand its sphere of influence economically, militarily, and diplomatically. The extent of its sphere of influence has never been clearer than recently, as we face a global pandemic originating in China. The World Health Organization is under Chinese influence. Designated scientists are struggling to investigate the origins of the virus in China. Why does the government have blind faith in a compromised organization?
Honourable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's concerning to hear the member opposite talk about the World Health Organization under the influence of China. Listen, we know that the World Health Organization, like every organization, will have to conduct a review about how they've managed the global pandemic, but we also know that the institution plays a critical role in beating back not just COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, but diseases like Ebola, diseases like HIV/AIDS, diseases like the measles. Mr. Speaker, we need global action on disease. It's what protects us all. Thank you.
Honourable Député de Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Chinese forces are at work in Canada and they're threatening Canadian interests. By blindly relying on a compromised organization, the government has put the lives of Canadians at risk. It hasn't listened to Canadian experts. It cut funding to the Global Public Health Intelligence Network. It's questioned the asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19. Who is the government accountable to? Canadians or to the Chinese regime?
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we've relied on public health experts and officials, people that have epidemiological advice and virologists to guide our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we've worked with international partners. We've done the work that is needed to protect Canadians, and we're going to continue that work, Mr. Speaker. This is a global incident of public health crisis, and we have to rely on science as the way out. Mr. Speaker, it is concerning to hear the member opposite not understand that science is the way out of this crisis, and in fact, we will work strongly with all Mr. Speaker, we'll work strongly with all partners to ensure that we support provinces and territories and Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Another title for the Prime Minister. Canada is investing more than $100 billion in a policy for naval construction. 2/3 are going to Irving and Halifax, and 1/3 to Seaspan in BC. Less than 3% to Davie in Quebec City, which is one of the largest and most reliable shipyards in the country, with 50% of the naval capacity in this country.
Okay. What do you guys think?
It was interesting. It was nice to see politicians debating and discussing issues and offering different perspectives. I've seen clips of question period before. Like sometimes when I watch the news on the television, they'll be like, we're going to cut to question period for about 10 to 15 minutes. And, they show like some bantering going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, that's basically the format, be it in the House of Commons or a provincial legislature, to a lesser degree at the municipal level. Unless you are outside of jurisdictions like Montreal, where they actually do have political parties at the municipal level, it tends to be nonpartisan, although there are blocks of municipal politicians who are identified with the right or left wing, for example. There are progressives. There are those who are, more fiscally conservative, et cetera. And it's pretty easy to figure out who those people are, especially when they end up running for provincial or federal office. So the dynamics are still are the same. You have question, you have answer. What did you notice about that little excerpt that we saw? What are some of your observations about the nature of questions, the questions and the nature of the answers?
Well, today was opposition day, so it's when the opposition leaders or members of the opposition are allowed to ask questions on topics they feel are relevant. I know that the Conservatives were putting forward a motion today about China, where they're asking for the Canadian government to make a decision about Huawei in 30 days. So I'm not sure if any of my classmates are familiar, but right now, Canada is deciding who's going to build the 5G network, and Huawei is one of the companies on the listing. And people want Huawei because the network's fast, but the problem is that Huawei's affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party, and there's concerns over privacy leaks.
Well, there are allegations that it does
Yes.
bidding of the party. Yeah, but I take your point. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And this is a big deal, right? So what else did you notice? The parliamentary secretary was doing this. The public safety minister, Bill Blair, was doing this. They were both sort of reading. Did you notice that in their answers, they weren't really answering off the cuff, but they were referring to something? What do you think they were referring to, using as a reference? Did you guys notice? Patty Hajdu, the health minister, just spoke off the cuff. Bill Blair and the parliamentary secretary, William Amos, were not speaking off the cuff. What were they reading from? Any idea?
I assume it's some kind of party notes for what to say in response to different attacks or defenses, and like notes on whether to push back or disengage with, what's it called, a non-answer.
Right. Yes, they were question period notes. We used to call them house cards and so on. And I'm actually going to show you in a couple of minutes how you can access those and how they can provide you with material for whatever topic that you're working on. So let me just share my screen again, and I will actually show you where these come from. All right, so let's get out of that. All right, Bill Blair is up there, and as you may or may not know, he is the former chief of the Toronto Police, Bill Blair, and he was a star candidate for the Liberals back in 2015 and helped them dispel any notion that they were not in favor of law and order, especially when one of their big promises was legalizing marijuana. So Bill Blair was a major player, a major catch for the Liberals, and he has now been elevated to public safety minister. Okay, so let's go back to the syllabus here. And if we scroll down to is everyone on the syllabus? Okay, scroll down to proactive disclosures. So under the access to information heading, proactive disclosures. Okay. Any idea what is a proactive disclosure? What does that mean? Proactive disclosure. Divorce that term from politics or whatever, but just look at the term in general. What does proactive disclosure mean?
Documents that the government would be disclosing ahead of time, sort of in anticipation of someone wanting that information?
Absolutely, Harrison. So it means that the government is taking the initiative and is not waiting to be asked to disclose information, but they are disclosing it proactively. And this is part of an open government, open data policy that is now policy at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. You've heard me refer to open data before, which is equated to open government, but open data is a policy. It is not law, but it is policy that stipulates that government information stripped of all of these sensitive stuff that we shouldn't be privy to, such as private information, such as information that would betray cabinet confidence, or information that would betray any commercial secrets for companies, for example, or dealings between governments at different levels, different countries. You know, aside from those exemptions, information should be available by default. So that's the whole idea of proactive disclosure. So it means that if we look at this page, like government contracts over $10,000 are now searchable. Okay, the annual expenditures of travel and hospitality and conferences, searchable. Government travel expenses, searchable. Government hospitality expenses, searchable. Right? So this is a really good page just to get a sense of what is available at the federal level, and you'll find the similar information being available at the provincial and municipal levels. Okay, and even if you drill down at municipal or provincial institutions like hospitals, for example, universities, police services. Okay, open government, open data is really a thing. It is a policy. One of the types of documents that the government decided to make available are briefing notes here. So if we take a look at these search briefing note titles, just click on that, and you will be taken to a directory here, search briefing note titles and numbers. So is everyone here? So if we take a look at, okay, so what do we want to, you can search anything you want, but China, right? These are all of the responses that have been written on those pieces of paper that we saw. The parliamentary secretary and the minister and the public safety minister reading from, having to do with China. Okay, and we used to have to ask for these house cards or these question period notes. We used to have to file formal access to information requests for them. We don't have to anymore because essentially they're like news releases. Okay, they are in essence kind of prepared responses. So there's nothing sensitive to redact from them because this is what the government wants to say, right? This is the message that they want to put out. So if that's the case, then why is it useful to be able to search this information? Any idea? Why is it useful to search the information if the government wants it to be public anyway?
You might get more of a direct answer for a few things, or a answer to something that wasn't brought up, possibly.
Yeah, yeah. Or to play off that, Cassandra, maybe the government minister, because these are questions for the minister, right? Maybe the government minister wasn't asked the question, and it's just sitting out there, and the government was prepared to respond to something that might be controversial. The minister was briefed up. It was prepared in his or hers package of briefing materials, and it was never asked. Well, if we discover it, then we can do a story on it. It's new, right? So if we use one of the search terms, Huawei, for example, okay? Let's just, because that is a hot topic. Whoops. Why is it not in here? I guess we'll have to. The problem with the briefing notes is that we'll search China again. The problem with the briefing notes is that they are only released twice a year, in the summer and in the fall, rather than real time. So if we wanted to know what Bill Blair was reading from, for example, we wouldn't be able to have access to that until the summer, until June. And that's the problem with this. But that being said, these are very useful. So let's just stick with China, and because that was a hot topic of concern. And why is there so much concern about China, by the way? In addition to Huawei, what is the deal with China?
Well, because there's concerns that COVID-19 was made in a lab rather than it came from the wet market. When I was doing my internship at the National Post, I actually did a story about a report that was released by the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and the Canadian Security Research Group, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And it found that there is evidence that the virus did come from a lab.
Right.
So that would mean, are we going to put sanctions on China? Are we going to cut off relations and trade with China?
Right, right. And why are the conservatives so hung up on China? What are the politics at play here? We've spent the last several weeks talking about looking at the politics and the policy and separating them and analyzing them. So what are the politics at play here?
Well, the CCP tries to influence elections and tries to influence policies in Canada. We've seen money laundering going on in Ontario and British Columbia. That's what's contributed to housing prices going up so much as well, because it's all this laundered money coming in.
Allegations.
From China.
Allegations. Right. Okay.
No, there have been, like the mansion in Markham, for example, mm-hmm. they believe that was laundered money that was brought in.
Mm-hmm. And there were charges in that case. So that is, but that has yet to be proven in court. But you're right, Jonathan, you're right. What are the other politics at play? Like, why are the conservatives pushing so hard on China?
China has been extremely hostile toward Canada over the past 12 months, and the Meng Wanzhou case is partly because of that. was a large part of that. And obviously the conservatives see the liberals as being weak on China.
Right.
And conservative base tends to take a more hawkish position. And this basically is a good way to paint Trudeau liberals as sort of appeasing what is right now sort of the Western world's number one foe.
Right. And so, yeah, that's the politics at play. They feel that that is a weakness of the liberals. They see the weakness. They see the liberals as being weak when it comes to China, weak when it comes to dealing with Huawei and Meng Wanzhou, and trade, and the two Michaels who are being allegedly held in retaliation for our detention of Meng Wanzhou. All kinds of reasons, right? So the conservatives see that as a real opening that they can exploit. So that's really the politics at play. Whereas the liberals, they have to be a little bit more careful. Why is that? Why does their position have to be more nuanced? Why can't they just say, China, to heck with you, we're done with you? Why can't they do that? Shakir, what do you think?
I'm sorry, my connection just dropped, so I did not catch any of that.
Did you hear that? My question was, why are the conservatives so hung up on China? Why is that a priority for them? Why do they see this as a weakness? And on the liberal part, why do they have to be more nuanced in their response about China? Why can't they just say, well, conservatives, you're right, we should stop dealing with China?
Well, that's a delicate situation on more than one level. We can look at it broadly in two ways: economic and legal. Right now, our main legal dispute with China is internationally over the Uyghurs. We're one of the few states in the world who's actually condemned China on the concentration camps in Xinjiang. It's the item that's probably the most pressing for our diplomats, because we're dealing with legitimate work, like legitimate Geneva Convention statutes. So in terms of seriousness and escalation and how close we get to, pushing a military button, that trigger point is very close, or closer than most things. And then you have a backdrop of a virus that originated in China. And then when you think of, what a modern military situation would mean, a biological component has to be considered. You're talking about your CBRN networks. And then that's not to mention the economic side, because how much do we import from China? We all felt that when the pandemic started and our supply chains were stopped for probably the first time in a long time, we felt what it was like to have goods stopped from China.
Right.
And it's been memed with toilet paper, but you saw what behavioral changes that led to. So PPE production. There was a period in March where you could not buy masks like people were. So that was the first, China has caused us to change as a society, our mobilization, probably more than since the election of Donald Trump. It's just ratcheted everything up to a level of seriousness that the government hasn't had to deal with in a while, and we're figuring out what that means, because now the stakes and the scales have been raised.
Okay, let me show you something here. So I'm going to, and this is where I talk about the use of data and primary records. Shakir, you mentioned trade, okay? So I'm going to take you to a website here, Trade Data Online, right? To give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Trade Data Online is run by what used to be called Industry Canada, but is now Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. If you just type Trade Data Online into your browser, you'll come to this, right? And let's just search by product, okay? And we will search our trading partners, let's just do all countries. Last 5 years, total, just exports. We are an exporting nation, just total exports in Canadian dollars and just all products. Okay, so we're going to run this report. These are in the, we have to add 3 zeros to all of these. Okay, we have to, no, we do not. Actually, they are in real dollars. Sorry about that. What do you notice about this? These numbers are in descending order, 2000 for 2019. What do you notice about China? Where does it sit?
Second.
Second. China is our largest, second largest trading partner, dwarfed behind the United States, which is why we spent so much time the previous weeks talking about the United States and the election, is because they are a huge influence on us. We are an exporting nation. They are our largest trading partner by far. So we have to pay attention to what they do. When they sneeze, we get a cold. Okay, so we have to pay attention. But this is why we can't ignore China. Okay, last year we exported $23.2 billion of goods, right? That is huge for an exporting nation like ours. The UK was third, Japan was fourth, etc. But you don't see a whole lot of other Asian countries. So if not China, then where do we go? And that's the problem that the Liberals face, is that they many businesses, many jobs, Canadian jobs, depend on our doing business with China. Okay, so this is, yes.
It's not even just China, because a lot of our trade goes to the United States, but plurality of large corporations in the United States source from China too. So
That's
we're
right.
connected to China even through them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the whole supply chains, and there are lots of connections, as Shakir rightly points out. That's why we have to take, the government has to take a more nuanced view, is because it is under pressure from businesses to maintain our contacts with China. Don't do away with them. But at the same time, we can't turn a blind eye to their treatment of the two Michaels. We can't, or the Uyghurs, for example. We can't turn a blind eye to the human rights violations, or when they come out hard against us and start lecturing us on what we should do with regards to people in Hong Kong, for example. Okay, so if we go back to these briefing note titles, right, and I just did a search on China, and you may have in the interim put in your own search terms. So let's just go down to this one, Canada's relationship with China. So if we click on the reference number, whoops, hang on here. Whoops. Let me go back to the syllabus here. Oops. Okay, question period notes. This is what I meant here. Okay, question period notes, right? So these question period notes are the notes that are written for ministers or parliamentary secretaries. What's a parliamentary secretary, by the way?
A parliamentary secretary is a minister's assistant.
Mhm.
So they're in charge of helping out with the minister and coming up with policies, working on bills that are under that minister's portfolio.
Okay. So if we plug a Huawei into the search engine, so again, just to review, I had taken you to the to a different website that I will refer to later, but what I want you to go to is the question period notes. So again, I'll go back to the main page here. Whoops. Okay, so the proactive disclosure, right? So what I had showed you is search for briefing note titles and numbers, which is fine. Okay, so a question period note is a briefing note, but what I'm specifically referring to is what Bill Blair, the public safety minister, was reading from, what the parliamentary secretary was reading from, was a question period note. So click on that, and then put in a search term like Huawei, search, and you have 5 hits, right? So the most recent document is last December, and that's because Parliament wasn't meeting very frequently because we were in the middle of a pandemic. We still are, and these question period notes are only released twice a year. So if we click on the first one, Canada and China, you have a reference number, you have a date received, you have the organization, right? And the National Defense, Harjit Sajjan, right? And then the question. So they anticipate the question. Why is the government not taking seriously the security threat posed by China? That really echoes the questions that the ministers were facing in the little snippet of the House of Commons that we saw, right? And then there's a suggested response. The government recognizes the need to engage with international partners, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, to maintain peace and security. Okay. The Canadian Armed Forces and the Chinese People Liberation Army maintain regular high-level interactions on issues of mutual interest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? But look at this. If pressed on Huawei, right? So this is the suggested response. And then if pressed, in other words, if they're still asking, if they're still not satisfied with your talking points, then this is what we suggest that you say. If pressed in Huawei, well, then say the government of Canada takes the security of our country's critical infrastructure very seriously. 5G networks will be a key driver of innovation and enable new technologies such as cleaner energy, smart cities, and autonomous vehicles, right? And then some briefing notes have if still pressed, and then they have another suggested answer, right? So it's like, okay, if they're being really persistent and doing their jobs as the opposition, this is what you should answer. So it suggests that this first suggested response is what? Why should they have it if pressed to answer this? Why isn't this stuff up here?
It's the game of politics.
Politics, yeah. They don't want to answer stuff that they don't want to reveal information that they're not pressed to reveal. Okay? And that's where we come in. That's why we ask questions. That's why we are prepared. Right? Because the government is only going to tell you, and this is not just the Liberal government or conservative government before them, or a provincial government or a municipal government. This is politics. That's why we have courses like this, right? Is because the defensive position is just to tell you what they think you want to hear, and not the real juice, right? So then you get if pressed on Huawei, well, okay, right? Then we'll reveal this. And then other briefing notes will say, and if pressed further, then they'll have other information, right? And it's the responses under the if pressed, et cetera, that's what gets closer to the truth, to the extent that we can, right? But then what's really good about these briefing notes is that you have all of this background, right? And then look at all this information on Huawei. Okay, recent media interest, like everything. Okay, so the briefing note becomes a really good primary record because it's prepared by the government for a minister to respond to a question in the House of Commons. It is a primary record and it has all of the information you need. So if you were doing something on Huawei, for example, you would want to have access to this briefing note for all of the background and everything that you need. Even though the first part of it is just talking points. All right. So what I'm going to suggest you do is I'm going to give you, let's go back to the general search here, and you've got about 1,200 of these things, of these records, and you can also download what's called a CSV file right here. Download the results. You can download this as a CSV file, put it in a folder, and you can open it up and you can organize it, right? If you're experienced with Excel, and those of you who have taken investigative courses or data journalism courses will know how to do this, or you may know how to use Excel because you use it for your own books or to keep track of your expenses or your sources or whatever the case may be. What I want you to do is just go back to the main page and just spend 5 minutes just searching for something that's maybe related to the topic that you want to do for your last assignment or something of curiosity, and tell me what you dig up. Okay? Give me 5 minutes.
David, I had a question.
Yes.
When you were talking about the question periods, I'm not sure if you said it or it was someone else, but is it true that most ministers will have public records for publishing, like the ones that we're reading right now, and an unofficial set with like abbreviations or shorthand that won't end up going on the internet for us to see?
Maybe. Maybe, but I mean, they are actually given a binder with a number of these notes that they can, kind of flip through. And so this is what they're reading from.
So like they don't have an unofficial docket that they're reading.
Like I said, I don't know about that. But this is when they're standing up and they're reading, like we saw Bill Blair do, this is what they're reading from.
Okay.
See on your screen, yeah. So I don't know if you guys came across anything interesting, but I'll just share this with you. So this is about COVID-19 measures at immigration and holding centers. Okay, so this was June 17th, 2020. And it doesn't have the question here, but it has a suggested response. So the question was presumably something about COVID-19 measures at immigration and holding centers, because there was a time when there was a lot of discussion about COVID-19 outbreaks in penitentiaries, for example, okay? And then by extension, immigration holding centers and what safety measures were put in place. So you have these suggested responses, the health and well-being of the Canada Border Service Agency staff, contracted workers in immigration holding centers, detainees, and the general public remains paramount, right? So that's your basic talking point, which is we take this issue very seriously. Well, of course you do. If you didn't take it seriously, then that would be news. The fact that you take it seriously, that's to be expected because you're the government. Okay, so these are the suggested responses. Then you have if pressed. Okay, if pressed. And then you have, if pressed. So if you're asked about a detainee who is asymptomatic, then what happens? And you have a number of responses. And then if pressed on minors in detention, oh, that's touchier, right? We saw that Donald Trump got into trouble because of some of the ways in which minors were treated at the border with Mexico. Okay, so if pressed on minors in detention, this is what you should answer. So this is the kind of cascading effect of some of the briefing notes that I was describing a little earlier, that at first you get the basic talking points, and then as you drill down, and if those pesky politicians, or these are similar to briefing notes that are written for ministers who are answering questions from journalists, for example. So if those pesky journalists really do their jobs and ask you pointed questions, if pressed, then answer this. And if really pressed on a delicate matter, answer this. Okay? And then you have the background on detention centers, okay, the numbers and so on. And then the background on detention statistics, on minors in detention. Okay, so these briefing notes are really mini gold nuggets. They really are. They're very useful primary records that you should mine consistently, especially if you are going to be reporting on politics or anything having to do with federal responsibility. This is a very useful public record to mine. Did anyone else come up with any interesting examples?
I saw some briefing notes on the digital charter.
Yeah.
It was directed to Navdeep Bains, who is the Minister of Innovation, Science, and
do you want to share your screen and
industry?
We can take a look at it.
How do I do that?
I've given you control, so you can share your screen now.
Okay.
At the bottom, you should be able to see a menu there that, I have to stop sharing. Sorry about that. Okay, go ahead. Now you can share.
All right, well, I have to go into my system preferences and do that.
Yeah, so.
The heck? God, this is whacked.
Okay, while Jonathan is doing that, can anyone else want to share? Any example that they came up with?
Oh, I got it. I got
There
it.
we go. Okay, there he is.
So the digital charter, it was directed to Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains.
Mm-hmm.
So the question was, how is the government going to ensure fairness for all in the new digital space?
Mm-hmm.
So he brought up, digital trust has been shaken, obviously, with like issues related to digital media and how not everyone has equal access to it, particularly if you're in a rural or remote area. It's quite tough to get access.
Mm-hmm.
So he wants to expand the access, and then you allow social media platforms to play a meaningful role in promoting a healthy and resilient democracy, but also, giving them responsibility to manage communities. There was a hearing about this, I believe it was early last year, about big tech censorship in Canada. We've seen in the States that big tech censorship is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the digital charter too down here as well, and what they're hoping to promote. So there's universal access, safe and secure services. We've seen that with some of the antitrust lawsuits going on in the States against Google and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I find a little interesting as well is free from hate and violent extremism. We've seen cases in Canada of people who have been banned from social media briefly because they post something that's a little politically incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was talk. I don't think they ended up following through with it because of a backlash of bringing back Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. So what Section 13 did was, if you felt you were being denigrated by a post, you could claim that and file a human rights complaint.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So is this an example of a document that you would be able to use for a story or assignment, Jonathan?
Yes.
That's good. All right. Does anyone else want to? You can stop sharing now if you want. Does anyone else want to weigh in with something interesting that they found? Or an opinion about how useful these kinds of records.
I can go again if you want. I have another one I read.
Okay, let's give someone else a chance. I'm sure that that someone wants to share.
Well, I took a look at the data set that you mentioned,
Right.
like the CSV file, since I did get some classes in data.
Okay.
These are not organized consistently. A lot of the posts inside don't have the French translation. Sometimes they're French only. Sometimes they don't have the industry in mind. So you'd get maybe 100 entries in if you're searching for some ministries, and for others, a lot less. Not because these ministries haven't been talked about, but sometimes the entries are just not inputted correctly.
Okay.
So like if anyone is interested in doing data, they'll have to do quite a bit of cleaning on their own.
Okay, so you downloaded the CSV file.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I'm looking at another data set, historical Canadian, the natural gas production, and it shows
do you want to share yours? You want to share?
it's nothing really to share. It's just unclean data, so I really haven't had the.
Okay, so this is what folks are talking about. Let me share my screen again. This isn't a data class per se, or it isn't at all, but so let's just clear, I'm going to clear my choices, right? And I've got about 1,200 records. So I'll download the results, and I can, let me find a folder because you have to be very organized. So here we go. And November the, where are you? Come on. November the, okay, November 17th. So I'll create a folder, and I'll create a subfolder, right? So data. And here we go. All right, so very important to be organized. So now this is a CSV, what's called a CSV file, which that stands for comma separated value, but it can be opened up in in Excel or Google Sheets if you use Google Sheets. So when we open, and you probably want to call it something more than just this nonsensical a name here. So we probably want to call it question period notes, and you have the date and the time that it was downloaded. So if we open it up, okay, this is what Kate was talking about. So there's a lot of cleanup that has to be done. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to save this as an Excel file, because a CSV file only has one sheet, whereas an Excel workbook, you can have multiple sheets. So I want to save it as an Excel file, which has the extension XLSX. So I save it, right? And then I want to do a little bit of formatting, because anything that usually when I download stuff from the internet, it maintains the formatting. So I want to remove the formatting. So I go to Format Cells, and I'm just going to remove the text wrap, right? So it's a little easier to see, right? And then if I readjust the columns, so is this what you had, Kate?
No, I had the original one, so I guess it wasn't formatted.
So this is the original one. This is the CSV file, right? So if you take a look at the records, there are, let's come on. There are about 1,200, right? The same number. And then, but the advantage is now I can activate my filter here, right? And then I can go into this column here. Let me see here, where I have my description, okay? So you have the title. Oops. Oh, hang on. Yeah, so you have different columns, right? So you have the ID number, you have the reference number, right? You have the title, you have the minister responsible, okay? You have the question, and you have the background, and you have the response, okay? So, if you wanted to, you could put your filter on and, for example, and you could filter this for Huawei. Well, or China. Yeah?
Sorry, I just have a question. While I was just browsing through this site, I was just wondering if before they upload information about what a party leader says or anyone, does someone fact check at all before?
Yes, they scrub it for information. So anything that's personal, there are a number of exemptions. So basically it goes through all of the exemptions that are available under the Access to Information Act.
Yeah, because I was just wondering it while I was browsing, because I just thought, what if they're just, I don't know, Donald Trump has said some pretty crazy things. So what if they post it somewhere? I don't know.
No, this is just, these are just answers that are prepared for the ministers to when they are in the House of Commons. So it's called a briefing note. But the very first page that I showed you a briefing note titles, those are the titles of briefing notes that you could actually then request. But just to Kate's point, I just want to show you this because you can actually download the CSV file. And if you're familiar with Excel, you can filter it for different criteria, and you can create different worksheets and so on and so forth. So I'm not really going to go that much further with this, but just to show you that with all of these open data websites, you can, in addition to search for individual pieces of information, you can also download the results. So whenever you have a download button, you can download the CSV file. Okay. So that is so if we were, if I was doing like a story, for example, and we'll pivot to the assignment now. If I was doing a story about about China and Huawei and the fact that because of our dependence on personal protective equipment, because China is a major trading partner, then China is going to be an ongoing concern during the pandemic. So I might choose that as my story. That would be my thesis. And then I would have to, in 800 words, treat that in some way. So what records would I use? Well, two examples of records I would use are the ones that we looked at. So I might go into the question period notes, and I might use Canada-China bilateral relations, for example, and I might click on this, and this is a briefing note from June the 12th, right, where we are concerned about the detention of the two Michaels and so on and so forth, right? Or I might be concerned about I might select China, and let me try this COVID-19. There we go, personal protective equipment and trade relations, right? So this is from June the 18th. And the question here is the government of Canada to support the procurement of medical supplies from China. Trade with China has been decreasing in 2020 due to COVID-19, but this decline is unrelated to failures in some procured PPE, personal protective equipment. Then you have the suggested response, you have the background. Okay, so this would be an example of a public record you would use. Then you would say, okay, well, this is the government's response, but like Canada is a major trading partner with China. How would I prove that? Well, we have the trade data online, right? We know that the Department of Innovation, that used to be called Industry Canada, has trade information. This information is also available at Statistics Canada, right? Which is another really, really good source of information. Okay, so, these are all the StatCan tables on trade. All right, so what I'm looking for is your ability to mine public records to back up. So if I want to make the point that we are a major trading partner, I have I can say that according to this data, government data, that Canada was the second, China was our second largest trading partner. Their political concern about China and trade with China and protective personal protective equipment is an ongoing concern. Boom, this briefing note right here. So that's two of the kinds of records that you will be required to use and to link to as proof. Okay, and then you might want to to link to like other other kinds of records as well. The sky's the limit. All right. So when it comes to public records, there are many. Can you guys give me an idea give me a couple of examples of public records? Primary records, we've talked about them before. Think about the primary records that you used during your presentations the other week.
Press releases.
News releases, yeah, Jonathan?
Statements, like sometimes instead of a press release, a minister will put out a statement being like, I'm announcing that today we're declaring this a holiday, or today I'm announcing this measure.
Okay, yeah. Any other examples of that we can think of public records?
in terms of public records, things you can access. So sometimes like criminal records, the results of court cases,
Okay.
when court cases happen as well, like on the court website.
Court documents. All right.
Yeah.
Court documents. All right. Let's make these nice and big. Okay. So okay, Cassandra, do you know a site that you would go to find court documents?
I've only ever really used it in BC, but I know that there is one in Ontario where I forget what it's called, but it's through the
I'll go one better. It's called Canly, and it is a database. The Canadian Legal Institute, the Legal Information Institute. This is all of the court cases where there are decisions. So you will not get decisions that are in process, but you get past decisions. So if you want to look up cases from courts, from quasi-judicial bodies like human rights commissions, for example. So if we, in this database, if we type in COVID-19, right? These are all of the cases, and this is another, really good database. Okay, these are all the recent cases having to do with COVID-19. Okay, and you can click on the link, right? And here's the actual document. You can download the PDF, right? So this Canly is a very good site. Okay, so that would be an example of a court document. Another one might be and that really is a catch-all, right? So example Canly, right? So we mentioned news releases, court documents. What other examples of public records would we want in mind for our final assignments?
Studies,
such as?
Like if a study came out, for example, about political polarization, or a study came out about policing, something like that.
Okay, all right. How about polls? All right, governments poll about all kinds of things.
Depends on the time of year and the stage of the parliamentary cycle.
Well, Shakir, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the website 338 Ridings. They do poll tracking pretty much every week.
Yeah, Adam Silvers, I think.
Yeah. They're quite active.
Mm-hmm. So you have public opinion polls, for example. So you would have, for example, Ipsos, like all of the major news organizations have polling companies that do polls for them, and they do polls regularly, right? So it's just a question like Nanos, for example, does polling for the Globe and Mail. Okay, so you have, Nanos reports, and a lot of the stuff is behind a firewall, but still, it's not, there's nothing stopping you from trying to get a hold of this information. Or I would maybe go through your library. Your library might have access to this. Okay, so here, after coronavirus as top issue, three-way tie between the economy, healthcare, and the environment. Okay, so these polling companies are polling constantly, right? So if you want to get a pulse of the latest on an issue that you are researching, think about a poll that might have been done, right? So this is an example. Abacus is another polling company. Okay, and this is Abacus here. Okay, and same kind of thing, right? All right, so polls. What would another example of a public record be? How about a Hansard search? You guys know what that is? right? Who can tell me what a Hansard search is?
It's the transcript that speakers, it's a transcript of speakers in Parliament.
Absolutely. So Hansard, and you can go Hansard Federal, Hansard Ontario, for example, right? And it'll take you to the Hansard page. Here we go. And it's because now the House is in session. Okay, the 42nd, and then you can do a general search, right? So you can search for COVID-19, and these are all the questions that are asked in the legislature, all of the questions that are asked in committee, right? So you should be doing a Hansard search, right? And you have all the links here. So a Hansard search. So what we're basically doing is all of you should have, before you even start, you should have a checklist of public records that you're going through. So this is what I'm going to be looking for in your background, or in the background part of the assignment that you hand in. Is I want to see all of the public records that you went through. Like we've just made a partial list. Let's try to get to 10. What would be another example?
Books.
Yeah. What else?
I was gonna say government websites, like.
Absolutely. You know, it's like, you know, we try to outsmart ourselves, and one of the best things you can do is just go to the website. There's all kinds of stuff there. Okay, give me 2 more.
Well, let's include our data publications.
I'm gonna give you one. Auditor General reports. What is an Auditor General report? It's a federal or provincial or municipal watchdog. They do audits and all kinds of things. Expenses, they track money, right? So one of the things that you'd want to know is, has the topic that you're researching, has it ever been the subject of an audit, of a federal or provincial audit or municipal audit, right? There is a Toronto has an auditor, Ottawa has an auditor, major cities do, right? So we can go, it might be a little too early for COVID-19 stuff, but let's just see. Accounting, not a whole lot there. Okay, so an Auditor General report. Can you think of anything else? What was just passed? What did the Ontario government just pass?
A bill. You can use bills and budgets.
A budget. Okay, budgets. You should be consulting the budget. What did the Ontario budget have to say about the topic that you're researching, if anything? It may have said nothing, but go there. Okay, go there. Download the report, go through it, and pull out any information that you feel that is necessary. Okay, give me one more public record. I got one. Financial report of a publicly traded company. Why do we care about publicly traded companies? We've been talking about politics. Why is this guy mentioning publicly traded companies?
We need to track where their funds are coming from in case there's shareholders with a certain political stake.
Yeah. Yep. All right. The two promising vaccines that are making news. What kind of companies are making these vaccines?
Large multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies, Moderna, Pfizer,
Absolutely.
BioNTech.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And if you go to their websites, you will find their latest quarterly filings, right? So if a publicly traded company is part of your research, then I would expect you to go to its website and download its latest filing and see if there's stuff that you can find from that, right? So these are just 10 examples, 10 quick examples that you are free to use, right? But this is what I'm expecting. This is called due diligence, right? This is low-hanging fruit. It's information that is out there that is available. Okay, there are all kinds of other examples, but you'll notice that media reports are not on this list, right? Media reports are not on this list. Newspapers are not on this list. Well, and why is that?
Because you can find their primary sources if you track them down.
Okay. And they could also be wrong. So if you're going to be using if you're going to be citing them, then you might be just repeating a mistake, or repeating something that is libelous. So you want to do your own. You want to do your own research. You want to exercise your own due diligence. Okay. So I will. Why don't we take a break and come back at 4, and then I will entertain any general questions that people have about the assignment, and then what we'll do is I will let you go a little early, and I will make myself available for the remainder of the class for anyone who wants to do a one-on-one. The way we'll do it, well, I'll explain after the break. So why don't we take a break, and we'll come back at a shortened little break. We'll come back at 4 o'clock. How's that? Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to save. I will save this document. But I'm assuming that you guys have been taking notes as well, and it's on the recording. So I'm going to stop recording.
Well, it's just different ways to tie things in.
Okay. I just started recording again, and the question I had asked was we were talking about records, and I had put I had shared my screen, and I'm just going to do that again because I forgot to record. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I had shared the examples of public records that we had talked about, and we decided that this was very useful. And then after that, I had asked about workflow and whether people had set up Google Alerts and some of the dangers of relying too heavily on news reports. And then we talked briefly about, well, under what circumstances would we use news reports? And Shakir had rightly pointed out that we would use them as basically tip sheets, right? That there might be, individuals who are quoted in articles, experts who are quoted in articles. But then we would have to go to those experts. We would have to go to those reports. We would have to go to that material and judge for and get the material and see for ourselves. We're not going to take a secondary source's word for it, but we use the newspapers as tip sheets. We do that all the time, which is one of the reasons that you should be setting up a Google Alert. If you haven't done it already, you should set it up. All right.
David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. You said yesterday to remind you to tell us how to set up a TweetDeck column.
Ah, very good, Emma. Right. I can do that. So let me do that. So that would be another way to do it. And so I'm just going to get this going here. And then once it's up, I'll share my screen. Do you guys use, does anyone here use TweetDeck?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I do pretty often.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good way of following individuals on Twitter. You know, I must say that a lot of my colleagues were addicted to this. And quite frankly, TweetDeck is basically how it provided lots of material for our show when I was on Power of Politics. If someone is tweeting about something, they're likely to come on your show and talk about something. Or if they're tweeting about something, they're likely to respond to you if you get to them with a request. So let me just share my screen here. Hang on here. And I will show you TweetDeck. So I'll just hang on here. Whoops. Where did it go? And let me share my screen. And so this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is TweetDeck. And you can see that it's a little clunky, it's a little slow. Sometimes it times out, right? But you can see that I have a number of columns here, right? And I have different topics. So if you want to add a new column, right? Then what you can do is you can go to add column here, right? You add your column, list, and then you create a list. And then I can call it, let's call it, boy, what should we call it? China. Let's call it China. Canada, China relations. And there I have it, right? So then it's suggested the China Institute, right, which is in Alberta. I click that and it's done. Sometimes it takes its sweet time, but it's done, right? And once it's done, then it will be added. And so that becomes a column now that I can follow. So if you're doing, if you're doing COVID-19, you might, want to be following different aspects of COVID-19, such as the economics or the health or whatever. And here you see the new column. I'll just move this over, and you can see the new column. It's populated, right, with the China Institute tweets and then retweets as well, right? And then if I wanted to add to this now, I can click on this little that little icon there, and I can edit my list, and then I can just add new links here. Okay, I can edit my list. Someone's got their volume on there. You want to mute your mic? Thank you. And so anyway, here you can then, let me move this over a bit so you can see it a little bit better. And then here I can, if I get a new a Twitter handle, I plug it in here, right? And then I add it to the list, and then it's done. Okay. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to, and then to close it, you do this. So let's just say I wanted to add another one, and I'm going to add this. Professional Development Institute of Ottawa, intellectual capital, right? And let's say that I wanted to add that. So I'm going to copy that And I'm going to go back to my tweet deck. Rats, I'm going to move this over here. So click on the icon, edit my list, and now I'm going to paste in the Twitter handle, search, and when it comes up, I add it. And then every time you do that, it gives you other suggested results. And then once it's done, right, then it populates it with even more information. So in addition to a Google alert, I would set up a tweet deck where you can follow what people are tweeting, follow the experts. Not only for this class, but for any other class. Like I've been doing some investigation into charities. So these are the people I'm following. I wrote a piece for National Observer on green hydrogen, right? So this is the stuff that I've been following. Green stimulus, the stuff that I'm following. The hashtag, and you can create columns with hashtags as well. So hashtag CDPoly is Canadian politics, right? So that's a really good hashtag to follow. I've mentioned, columnists who you want to follow, people like Susan Delacourt from the Toronto Star. You'd want to set up a column of just political columnists, right? You can follow them as well. So it is a really good strategic way to use Twitter in a very efficient manner. You can just follow the people who you want to follow, and you don't waste too much time. Okay. So Emma, does that do the trick?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for reminding me. So I'll stop sharing now. And so does anybody else have any questions general questions about the assignment? Are you still in the dark about certain things?
I kind of do.
Mm-hmm.
So today I did an interview with one of my experts. He's a politics professor at Western. So I was asking him about what he thought about voter fraud in relation to the US election. And he was asking for more of like a directive in my story. And I was trying to explain that I'm trying to figure that out still. So I guess my question would lie in like, are we supposed to be, like, obviously we're supporting these arguments with, academic resources, primary resources, using this, like I would look up stuff, information on voter fraud and like American documents on that from the White House and things like that. But I'm just wondering, should we have some sort of thesis, I guess, or like
That's exactly what I was going to say. Voter fraud is a topic. It is not a story.
Right.
A story about voter fraud might be the unwillingness of U.S. President Donald Trump to acknowledge Joe Biden as the winner of the election,
which is what we discussed today.
Has spurred even more conspiracies about voter fraud.
Yeah, I think that's the direction I'm going to go, because he was talking about that and he was like, that's kind of where I would stand as a political scientist. And so then we talked about that specifically. So I think I'll just continue.
Yeah. So that is, and that would be, Cassandra, that would be your lead, right? Because this is a story, but it's an opinion piece as well, right? It's like an op-ed that you're writing. And so I'm giving you more latitude, right? Okay. You don't have to discover something that no one has talked about. Right, you're taking something, you're taking an issue and you're moving it forward, right? So you're taking a topic and you're discussing an element of that, a newsworthy element of that topic, which is that it's, his actions have given rise to all these doubts about voter fraud, right? And so in your piece, then you might say, okay, well, I've got 800 words. So so in that thesis, like what primary record am I going to use to support that? To support the fact that this has opened up a whole bunch of other, conspiracy theories. It could be based on an interview, according to Joe Smith, a political scientist at Temple University, right? So that thesis then could be a quote attributed to the person you have interviewed, right? Or it could be attributed to a news release or one of the 10 primary records that we have referred to, right? So there has to be a source for that. Like just don't give me a thesis or a focus statement unsupported. You can't do that.
Could I reference like the 2000 election with Al Gore and how he took it to the Supreme Court and like documents that support that idea in relation to today?
That would not come in your lead.
Right.
That would be in the middle part. So think about how you structured your group presentations. You had an opening, which was your focus, which was your lead, right? This is what I'm going to tell you. This is what I'm going to tell you about this issue that moves it forward, right? That discusses issues that are topical today and that will be topical tomorrow. The middle part is, this is the context for it, right? This just didn't happen out of the blue, but it happened back in, with Bush and Gore, right? And these were some of the issues at play, but this is how it's evolved since then. And then the third part would be the conclusion. How do you wrap it up? I'm looking for a conclusion. Where do we go from here? And I want to get beyond the cliche. So as I pointed out in my feedback in your second assignment, I'm not looking for a time will tell. Don't tell me the obvious, right? Move it forward in a very educated and a very prescient way.
He mentioned today
to do so using a cliche like time will tell. Well, of course time will tell.
He mentioned today, we talked a little bit about like what he expects for January when inauguration comes around. So I guess I could.
That could be, yeah. Yeah. But I would also caution that you don't only want to talk to that one person, because then, yeah. And I'm not suggesting that you are, but we want to, like, in your background document, you're going to tell me who you talked to, what records you referred to. But what I'm looking for is interviews or attempt interviews with many people for background. Only maybe 2 or 3 of them might end up in your story or in your op-ed and your opinion piece, but you've talked to a whole bunch of people. That's just good reporting. You may have consulted all kinds of records, but maybe only about 3 or 4 of them end up in your story. The minimum number, just the best stuff. So in other words, only the best stuff ends up in your story.
In terms of contacting other people, I'm sorry, I know I'm taking so much time, guys. In terms of contacting other people, I tried to speak to some like American politicians, congresswomen, not going so well because it's kind of a controversial topic, but I'll include that, I guess, in my...
Follow them on Twitter. That's why I'm suggesting you do that. Follow them. And if you can't, try to contact, but what are they tweeting about? If they're tweeting about stuff like that, that's a public record. That's a primary source.
So I can use the tweet that the congresswoman, like AOC, I tried to contact her. It didn't go well, but I tried. So I could use what she's saying, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And embed those tweets in your story. Embed them. That's why I suggested, and I'm grateful that Emma B had reminded me about the tweet deck, because I would suggest that you all do that, right? That's a way, like, you're not realistically, you never say never, but it's going to be, it's a tough slog trying to get a hold of politicians, especially American politicians, but they're all active on social media.
So in that case, then I wouldn't use that interview. I would contact someone else to fill that spot and then use the American politicians, I guess, as the source, right? Because I still need to have 2 voices. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm not just talking to like political scientists and just covering all the bases.
Well, you talk to the people who you need to talk to, who you feel, who you, I mean, obviously we're in a political class, so we got to talk to politicians, right? We don't only want to speak to academics, right? We want to speak to politicians. We want to speak to pollsters. We want to speak to, former politicians, for example. There's all kinds of people. But that's why you want to set up your tweet deck, and you want to set up your news alert, because that'll give you an idea of who is saying what. And they go, geez, that's an interesting point. I'll contact that person. I'll reach out to that person. What are they saying on Twitter? Let me follow them. What are they saying on Facebook or Instagram? Let me follow them. Right? That's a public record. You try to, you try to reach them directly through one of those platforms. You try to email them, but if not, at least you got a record of what they're saying, and that becomes part of the conversation. And yes, you can use that as a voice, as long as I have evidence that you've tried to email them. and
Yeah,
try to-
emailing AOC didn't go so well, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
email and phone. But yeah, I mean, if they email a response to you, or if they're saying stuff on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram that you can then use and it works well with your story, then use that. That's fine. That's a voice. Yeah. I just want evidence that you've tried to reach them in person.
Yeah, definitely did. There will be a long list.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Okay, so I really do need to hear if people are feeling, how people are feeling about their assignments. Are people still not sure about topics, or are you unclear about the direction to take, or what? Talk to me.
David, I just have a question.
Yeah.
If we were working for you and you had an assignment, like if you treat this as something that you'd pitch to us that we'd do, what would like how would you just do that quick, like on the day pitch, like instead of reading that rubric?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
Like if you were to pitch this to us, like as in just a pitch meeting, like this assignment, as if it were a story.
So if I were you and I'm making a pitch.
Like okay, like you're asking for specifics, right? So you're asking for, I'm going to rephrase the question and then get back to you.
Okay, so here's where I think you might be going. So let's just say that I've been thinking about this for a long time, and hopefully you've been thinking about things like throughout this course, right? You're thinking about topics or things that you'd like to explore. That's why I'm trying to give you as much latitude as possible, but also provide as much support. So I've always felt that as the COVID-19 became increasingly politicized, right? You would see a checkerboard response across the country and within regions, right? That at the beginning of the pandemic, all the politicians, the prime minister, the premiers, the mayors, they listened to their public health officers. If their public health officers said do Y, they did Y. If they said shut everything down, they shut everything down, right? But now we're into a second wave of the pandemic. The politicians are having to listen to more voices, right? All of a sudden, economies or sectors have been shut down for a long time, for long stretches of time. They're suffering. They're concerned about another shutdown. So they're saying, well, we don't want you to do that, or we want to be able to stay open with certain conditions. You've got certain regions outside of the hotspots of Ottawa, Toronto, Peel, who are saying, well, if I live in North Bay, why does everything in North Bay or Sudbury have to be shut down when the problem is in Toronto, Peel, and Ottawa, right? So all of a sudden you've got a premier who's having to listen to a broader range of voices than he or she did before, and then make a political decision, right? It's very different than the dynamic that was at play at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. And I would probably even use this. Okay, so this is Doug Ford being questioned about his recent initiatives.
You ignored advice from public health officials when you set up your color-coded system, and that you lied to the public about that. How do you respond to that?
Well, that is just totally inaccurate, and I'm a little disappointed on that note, but that's one doctor's perspective that sits on the disease prevention table. At the end of the day, I stood here when we put this out with Dr. Williams, we went along with the framework and he approved the framework. Now, again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. We have to do a balance. You know, we could go, the easy thing to do, folks, is sit back, let's just shut down the whole province. Like, how do you deal with the, mental health again of people? It's easy for people to say, just shut everything down when they're guaranteed a paycheck every single week. How about these hardworking folks here at Petal Shipyards? Talk to the workers over there. If all of a sudden I went out there and said, guys, you're all shut down. By the way, you aren't getting a paycheck. Go collect unemployment. I'd like to see the reaction they have when they're working safely. So the approach of just saying shut everything down is not the approach we're taking. We're taking a balanced approach. Number one priority is the health and safety. And right beside that is the economy.
Okay, so that's what I mean, is that all of a sudden, the politicians are having to take a broader range of voices into account when they make their decisions. And so it means that you're going to have a more of a checkerboard. So in this in the instance of Ontario, for example, you had the Toronto's chief medical officer of health that decided to go one step further, invoking the powers that she has under the law because she was concerned about health and safety in Toronto. Okay, so with the increased politicization of COVID-19, you have different responses across regions, across the country. And so I would probably embed that clip of Premier Doug Ford. I would embed that. Okay, that's on YouTube. I would embed that. And then as my primary records, I would use what? I would use news releases from industry organizations who are talking about the importance of keeping the economy going. I would use news releases from public health officers who are talking about the need to be more careful. Okay, here we go. Saskatchewan brings in province-wide mask mandates, limits gatherings to 5. Okay, that's a news break that just came, right? And so those are some of the records that I would use to demonstrate the broader range of voices now that a political leader like a premier is having to listen to. And then I would talk to a political science about the politics of this and how difficult it is. And how does it compare to other crises like SARS, for example, or other periods in history where there was public health was the center of attention. Public health was a real concern. Right? That's essentially how I would structure it. And then I guess my conclusion would be, all right, so what are the risks that a politician like Doug Ford faces? Like all of a sudden, he's at an employment site. He's speaking directly to workers. Who is he talking to? Is he talking to his constituency? He's in the middle of his mandate, right? There's an election in a couple of years. How does he play this? So that moves it ahead beyond the cliched time will tell. And so you can see how I have a thesis. I'm able to use a public record, Doug Ford, basically talking. He lays it out. Yeah, I'm hearing from these people. I'm hearing from these people. No, I'm not going to shut everything down like I did at the beginning of the pandemic. I can't do that. And then you support it with other records, other documents, news releases, etc. Go to the websites of some of the industrial sectors at play that are very important in Ontario. Go to the Ontario Public Health website. And that's how you would do it. So Shakir, have you come up with a question for me, or did I hopefully answer it with my example?
It's like this assignment feels like a lot of an opinion piece.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but it's informed opinion. I've given you opinion, but
Right.
backed it up. It is an opinion. It's an op-ed, of course, but it's an informed opinion because we've spent the last, several weeks talking about politics and policy. So give me an opinion, right, based on the stuff that we've learned, based on the Google alerts that you set up, the people you're following, the public records you've looked at. Give me an informed opinion, back it up and write about it. And if you have any problems whatsoever, or if you want to talk it out, I've already spoken to a couple of people already. Then just let me know. We can set up a Zoom chat. We can go through it. You can run if you want to run an idea by me, feel free.
David?
Yeah?
Hi. Can I meet with you after class? I just wanted to jump in and ask.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to if no one else has any general questions.
David, I have a general question.
Yes.
So you mentioned the multimedia elements, and I was just wondering if you wanted to create something that needs to be embedded, you can't like embed something into a Google Doc. So would we just put it?
That's a very good question. Yeah. Just do the link. Give me the link.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? General questions? So here's what I would suggest we do. Those who want to leave, feel free. I will stay here till 5 o'clock. I will, like, if I'm talking to someone, just turn off your sound and your video and that. And then once I'm available, just try to jump in there. And then what we can do is at the end of the class, if you have questions, just email me and we'll set up a time. Right? But I would suggest that we should do that sooner rather than later. And you actually may have questions after you've talked to a few people and read some things. That's when you're probably going to have questions, right? Because you're probably going to want to know, well, this person said this, I read this, what do you think? Okay. And that's a normal part of the editorial process. Perfectly normal, right? You're just in constant communication with your editor, with your producer. All right. So I'm going to stop recording now, and I will be here until the end of class. Nikki, you and I can chat right away. If there are others that want to chat, please feel free to hang around and just let me know. All right. So I'll stop recording right now. And for the rest of you, I will see you all next week. 2 more classes to go.
Bye, thank you.
Boy, oh boy. Okay, bye-bye.